Welcome to episode 3 of The Rational Homer. I am your host, Kyle, on Monday, March 9th. Today we are blessed with a special guest to chat some college basketball conference tournament brackets. I do not claim or take responsibility for his takes, particularly when it comes to the Iowa Hawkeyes and Kentucky Wildcats, as he may be a bit irrational in the hopes and dreams department. First, we're going to start with the ACC, then move to the Big Ten, in the middle of the SEC, followed by the Big East, to wrap up with the best conference in college basketball, Big 12. Let's get into it. So first, we're going over the ACC bracket. Duke got the number 1 seed, followed by Virginia, though they're kind of the two best teams in the conference. Miami's kind of a close third. North Carolina is the 4 seed, is missing their best player in Caleb Wilson. Probably not going to do much this tournament, but, you never know. We're joined by Andy here, who also has some input as well.
Hello, thanks for having me, Kyle. I'm excited to get into these brackets, as always.
Yes. And now you did some research on bubble teams from the early games that begin on Tuesday. What teams do you think need to make a run in this tournament to potentially get into the March Madness tournament?
Well, I mean, currently, it depends on how much you trust Joe Lunardi, but he's got SMU as his last 4 in, and then he's got Stanford and California as part of his next 4 out, meaning they need to win a couple games to get on the right side of the bubble. And if I'm looking at the bracket correctly, SMU's playing Tuesday, and Syracuse has been struggling, might be firing their coach. They're going to have to make a run, but playing 6 seed Louisville if they win. Louisville's decent. And then Miami, the 3 seeds, we'll see. Then Stanford, the other team on the bubble that's playing Tuesday against Pitt, who's terrible and also might be firing their coach. But I could see them making a run against North Carolina State and maybe Virginia. They do, fun fact, have the leading scorer in the ACC, Ibuka Okori, at 23 points a game.
That is very impressive. And I've been on Stanford a little bit this year, and they're a very interesting team. It's like most teams, they get hot and cold, but, it'll be interesting to see how them spending the week in North Carolina being from California will have an effect on them, just with the time change and everything. I would assume, that will be a little bit of an adjustment for them.
Right, which is wild that we're having Stanford and California travel to Charlotte, North Carolina for their conference tournament, but that's for another podcast. And I should mention California, who's coached by NBA dancing legend Mark Madsen, doesn't play till Wednesday, but if they beat Florida State, then they got a fun matchup against Duke. So not really sure. I guess win against Duke and you're probably in, but that's a tall task.
Yes, and even beating Florida State as an 8-9 game is a pretty difficult task. They're still going to need some help to get into the tournament as well, I think, even if they beat Florida State.
Right, for sure.
But for this tournament, who are your dark horses that you can see maybe making it to the semifinals or even the championship?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough because 1 through 4, Duke, Virginia, Miami, North Carolina, definitely are the strongest teams. Clemson as a 5 seed, I could see them getting through North Carolina just without lottery pick, top 5 pick, Caleb Wilson. Or I kind of like seeing NC State upset Virginia and get into the semis as a 7 seed, and then play Miami, maybe Louisville, and see what happens. So I don't see any of those Tuesday teams getting there. They're just not good enough.
Yeah, and I have Louisville on kind of like my dark horse in this tournament. Just watching Ryan Cornwall a couple times, and it seems like they can get going and make a run potentially.
Yeah, I as a Kentucky guy, obviously, I struggle to pick Louisville, but Mikel Brown Jr. too, lottery pick. If he gets going, you never know.
No, then obviously we both have Duke winning the ACC tournament.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? Like,
Cameron
Boozer, just too much.
I'd say Evans, the duo of Boozer and Evans both averaging the top point scorers for Duke, and that's pretty much wraps up the ACC for us. So looking at the Big Ten bracket here, we have Michigan as the overall 1 seed, followed by Nebraska, and Michigan State, and then Illinois. And those teams don't play until Friday. 6 through 8 is UCLA, BU, Wisconsin is the 5 seed, and Ohio State. And then Iowa plays on Wednesday at noon, and they play the winner of Oregon and Maryland. In the first round game, which is tomorrow, Washington plays USC, Indiana plays the winner of Northwestern and Penn State, and Minnesota plays the Rutgers. So what are your early thoughts on this uh, Big Ten tournament, Andrew?
Well, first off, I'd like to get the most important point out there that Iowa has the toughest draw of anyone, objectively. Having to play, well, we'll forget Oregon and Maryland, but Ohio State and then Michigan, I mean, that's tough. And then potentially Illinois. But putting my homerism aside, I would say that I think Michigan obviously is the strongest team, but I'm looking at the top half of the bracket. I could see Wisconsin knocking off Illinois and giving Michigan another difficult game. And on that lower half, Purdue's been struggling. I kind of could see UCLA making a run and knocking off Michigan State. And then honestly, they would have to get through like Nebraska, Purdue, and neither of those teams scare me that much. So I think this bracket's got a lot of kind of upset potential.
I do like UCLA a lot. They have 5 scores that average in double figures. Their coach, Mick Cronin, a little bit of a wild card. Kind of reminds me of Fran McCaffrey a bit. But
Yeah, I can't stand them, but keep going.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think UCLA could be a dark horse in this one. And I mean, Indiana needs to win a couple games, I think, to secure their spot in the big dance. And, I think if they get by the winner of Northwestern Penn State, they can maybe take on Purdue and maybe secure their spot in the big dance.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana right now, first four out for Lenardi. They would obviously need to beat Northwestern or Penn State. Then Purdue, I think they could give them a good game just because Purdue's struggling. Indiana with Lamar Wilkerson, second leading scorer in the conference. Kentucky almost had him and should have. And then with Tucker DeVries, who's fifth and final season, maybe he can make a little bit of a postseason run. But selfishly, Darian DeVries being an Iowa guy, Ben McCollum being an Iowa guy, I need the Hawks to have a better postseason. So that'll be another thing I'll be monitoring.
Yes, and I mean, if Indiana somehow gets by Purdue, they could be facing another father-son duo and Sam Hoiberg and Fred Hoiberg.
Right. And it is shocking how good Sam Hoiberg has become, kind of just doing like the little things. Obviously, he's not like a scorer or anything, but he certainly holds his own in the games, as much as I hate to say that. But yeah, and Nebraska, looking ahead, never having an NCAA tournament wins, looking for a strong Big Ten tournament first. I don't know. I think in their last 11 games are like 6-5 or something. Yeah, I'm not a huge
Yeah,
believer.
they didn't finish as strong as they started, and kind of lost a couple of games they probably shouldn't have. And I mean, they looked overtime with Iowa yesterday on Sunday. Just a lot of little things that kind of make you concerned from a Fred Hoiberg perspective. They've had injuries on and off all year, and we'll just kind of see what happens there. I'm always pulling for Fred, but who knows what will happen when it comes down to it. They have Price Sanford, who's leader in the Big Ten in threes, and we'll just see what happens there.
I like Hoiberg. I'm not a Nebraska guy as an Iowa fan.
Yeah.
And Price obviously is really good. Wish he would have stayed at Iowa. Yeah, I mean, I think if they get going and they're shooting well, they obviously can make a run.
And so then who do you have in the championship for this tournament?
I think Michigan makes it from the top half. Bottom half, I'm gonna say Michigan State makes it again, even though I'd love to see UCLA knock them off just for some upsets. And then Michigan is gonna get Michigan State for a third time this year and cut down the nets in Chicago.
Yeah, I have Michigan and Michigan State as well. I would like to see, maybe UCLA or Nebraska make the championship game, but I think just Tom Izzo's history and his coaching style, and they're just, Michigan State's always solid, especially in March. I just think they pull through. And the only, thing that you talked about earlier is maybe Wisconsin somehow makes the semifinal and, pulls some magic against Michigan and gets the upset. But right now I'm locking in on Michigan and Michigan State in the final.
Agreed. And I mean, don't sleep on Illinois because they're so talented. And sometimes I think they do well in like this tournament where then Underwood will have his collapse in the NCAA tournament. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Underwood either. And, that regard? You were at Oklahoma State for a year or two, then just kind of bolted for Illinois, and yeah, just don't like the guy.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone.
Okay. So next we'll be moving on to the SEC, and we'll be talking about Kentucky, one of Andy's other favorite teams.
Yes, and man, it has been a rough couple, well, several years, but with this new Mark Pope era, I'm not a fan.
And looking at the SEC tournament bracket here, we got Florida as a clear and away number one seed, followed by Alabama, who had player issues going back, and people have very many opinions on that. Followed by former Kentucky coach John Calipari and his Arkansas Razorbacks, led by Darius Cuff, who's averaging 22 points a game. Then Vanderbilt snuck in at the 4 seed, and then 5 seed went to Tennessee. Then Texas A&M, Georgia, and Missouri. Indy's Kentucky is playing on Wednesday in the first round of games against LSU. What are your thoughts on that matchup, Andrew?
Well, first of all, I'm pretty depressed that Kentucky's playing at 11:30 a.m. on Wednesday when they used to call the SEC tournament the Kentucky Invitational. So how the mighty have fallen. LSU, it took us making a last-second buzzer beater on the road to beat them. I think it'll be a competitive game. I don't know. I'm so frustrated with Mark Pope that I'm not looking at this bracket being like, Kentucky's going to make a run and get to the quarters against Florida and maybe knock them off when we've played Florida twice and we haven't led for even a second. So, yeah, you can tell not a lot of positivity in these parts. And then, like you said, I have my former coach, John Calipari, having a good year with Arkansas and one of his best point guards ever in Acuff. And yeah, it's not going well here. Not going well.
How the tables have turned. How the tables have
Right,
turned.
right. But we'll be back. We'll be back.
And this is taking place in Nashville, Tennessee, so Tennessee gets a little home cooking, potentially lead to a matchup to upset Florida. But who are your dark horses in this tournament?
It's pretty crazy because I actually think the SEC, like, I look at these Wednesday and Thursday teams, and I quite literally don't think any of them can get to Saturday on the semifinals. Tennessee as a 5 seed has honestly been struggling. Sure, they might beat Vanderbilt, who I also don't think is that good, but then they would run into Florida. Texas A&M had that hot start with Buckyball and their pressing and everything. Maybe they knock off Arkansas. Low key something to watch, and I'm not believing him, but Porter Moser's like coaching for his job with Oklahoma. He loves to choke games, but they've been playing better, and as an 11th seed, maybe they get by Texas A&M and then get against Cal and Arkansas and see what happens. And then my last two, Kentucky, I think if they got a third shot against Florida, they are the only team that's lost by less than 10 in like the last 10 games against Florida. So who knows? But then Sean Miller with Texas as a 10 seed, you never know. He's got that Dalen Swain is pretty good, and Georgia and Alabama. Honestly, the SEC doesn't do much for me this year other than Florida and maybe Arkansas.
Yeah, I'm kind of been interested by Georgia a bit as a dark horse. But I mean, Georgia is Georgia. They're known for a football school, not a basketball school. They do have 3 good guards in Wilkerson, King, and Melinder. But, again, trying to get by Alabama and then Arkansas, I just don't, I would agree with you. I don't think we make a super deep run. It's just very interesting how, it's really Florida's tournament in the top half of the bracket and then bottom half. And there's a couple of different teams that they can make a run. Moser made that run with Loyola in March Madness many years ago. That landed him the Oklahoma job. If they're playing well, who knows?
Right. Florida with their 3 bigs, and now their guards are even playing well. They're so good. And like you said, I don't really see anyone stopping them. So in Georgia, I mean, they did just beat Alabama, and so they'll want that rematch. But yeah, I don't put a whole lot of stock in them, even though their guards are good and they have a couple huge bigs. But yeah, they're not getting much credibility from me. I will say Texas, Texas A&M, and Missouri are all part of Lenardi's last 4 buys. So they all kind of need a win, at least one to feel comfortable. And then, man, Stephen Pearl, which I could say a lot about him. He's with Auburn, part of the last 4 in. So he for sure needs at least one win to hopefully feel okay. I'd like to see Josh Hubbard, second leading scorer in the SEC with Mississippi State, knock them off. He can get super hot, so he's fun to watch, especially as a Wednesday game.
I've been watching Auburn a couple times the past couple of weeks, and it's a very interesting team. 16-15 overall. Maybe make a run and get into the tournament. I wouldn't say Pearl's been coaching for a job. But he's definitely lost some games that he felt like he should have won. They did beat Kentucky a couple weeks ago. That was kind of the game that they really needed to potentially make it to March Madness. Obviously, they had to win a couple other games too. They ended up losing to Oklahoma, lost another tough one to Ole Miss, then lost to Alabama on Saturday, with 12 points. But yeah, I mean, I like Auburn, good colors. It's kind of a fun team that can potentially do something, but we just don't really know. Do they have to? Again, they're a 12 seed, they haven't had that great of a year, but they've been playing better as of late.
Man, I didn't know you had this love for Auburn, but I'm writing that down right now, taking notes on it. 16-15 is something to be desired. But okay, how about this? We have Miami, Ohio, who's 31-0. Let's say they lose in the championship of their conference tournament. Then you have a 17-16 Auburn. Who do you let in?
No, Miami, Ohio.
Wow. Okay.
I think if a team goes 31-0 in the regular season, or whatever they're undefeated. Even if they lose the championship game, I think they deserve to get in. Regardless of their conference, that's still something that is very rare in today's age.
Yeah, I think I'd probably end up siding with that, but it is a pretty
It
crazy
is all,
debate.
it is all about, popularity and what brings the money. 'Cause that's what
Right,
the
right.
NCAA cares about, what brings the money.
Yeah.
So who do you see in the championship of this game, of this tournament?
I think we're gonna see Florida, and I think they're gonna be playing. I'm gonna go Texas A&M. I think John Calipari doesn't care about these tournaments. He always says he doesn't. So I'm gonna say Florida versus Texas A&M, and then Florida with the easy SEC tournament championship. Celebrate in Nashville, which is the new Las Vegas, fun city, overpriced, but a good time for sure.
Yes, I have Florida winning this tournament as well. I could see them playing A&M. A&M gets very streaky from 3-7 games though. That's kind of a little bit of a concern. But I think I'm gonna go a little bit out there, and I'm gonna say Florida ends up playing Georgia in the championship game. I think Georgia, as a dark horse, improves their seed a bit for March Madness and gets the job done.
I like it.
And that wraps up the SEC. We will be moving on to the Big East, which has a couple of former Iowa players on Creighton and Yukon and Hurley, who is a piece of work, that's for sure. And looking at the Big East tournament taking place in New York City, we got St. John's, led by Rick Pitino as the number 1 seed, followed by Yukon as the 2 seed, and they recently lost to Marquette, and there were some fireworks at the end of that game. And you got Villanova as the 3 seed, Seaton's the 4 seed, and Creighton's the 5 seed. And for the first round matchups, you got Butler and Providence, Marquette and Xavier, and DePaul and Georgetown. What are your early thoughts on this tournament, Andrew?
Well, I think the first thing when I was looking through this bracket is you have St. John's, who won the conference at 18-2, Connecticut with that stumble at Marquette this weekend, finished second at 17-3, and then Villanova with first year head coach Kevin Willard, 15-5. But then after the top three, the whole rest of the conference was either 10-10 or worse. I feel like you don't see that a lot. But so I just think very top heavy Big East conference this year. And I don't really see any of those lower seeds doing much.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, this is a smaller power conference with only 11 teams. You look at, you look at the Big Ten, you look at the ACC, you look at the Big 12. They all have, teams like 13 to 14 plus teams. You look at this bracket and it's a little bit smaller. It begins on Wednesday, and I mean, you got really 3 power teams maybe that you consider power teams: St. Jeff, UConn, and Villanova. But UConn's a very interesting team because that loss to Marquette, I think, hurts their March Madness seeding a little bit, and I think they need a very strong showing here to kind of get that back. And they lost to Creighton earlier in the year as well, and I think there's just a lot of questions surrounding UConn. How good are they actually?
Yeah, I mean, their loss for now, I think lost them that last number 1 seed in the tournament. And unless they win this Big East tournament and Florida would have to like lose right away, I think Florida is going to end up taking that last one seed. Like you said, smaller conference. Right now, it's funny. Lenardi has their top three, St. John's, UConn, and Villanova in the tournament. He has Seton Hall as the next four out, meaning they're going to definitely need to beat Creighton on Thursday and try to pull an upset on St. John's. Otherwise, no one else is getting in from this conference, which is kind of quite a bit of a down year for them. Creighton, it's crazy that feels like they had a good portal offseason on paper. Obviously, they got a couple Hawks, Owen Freeman, who I was never a fan of, and Josh Dix, who I do think is solid, but been a terrible year. And they're like last year, they're going to fire up the McDermott to maybe Arizona State rumors. So we'll see. And then Butler, Scott, freshman Jack McCaffrey, which some ties to the Iowa City area. But yeah, I don't think this tournament, it's always fun to watch, but I don't think there's many
Many
chances for a
storylines.
big, yeah, right, and big upset potential.
Yeah, so I think it would definitely be, St. John's has been solid all year. They lost to Iowa State early in the year in the tournament. That was a great game there. I see St. John's winning this tournament, but I think I'm going to have them beating Villanova in the championship game. And I think UConn stumbles again in the semifinal.
Really?
What are you?
Okay. I think St. John's and Connecticut are gonna have a rematch, which I think would be a really fun game to watch. Villanova's good. They have former Kentucky commit Caden Lewis, freshman point guard, who's having a good year. We'll see though. All these other teams just don't do much for me. DePaul, I like Chris Holtman for some reason, and they were so bad, and now he has them as a 6th seed. So like maybe make a run or something. That'd be fun to watch. Yeah, I just feel like Big East. I will say their tournament always seems to have some crazy like upsets and a lot. It's really fun to watch, but on paper right now, it's not doing much for me.
Yeah, I think that's a safe assumption when there's only three teams that can really do anything in the tournament. It's kind of a tough thing to go over.
Right.
And we're moving on to our last bracket, which is the Big 12 that we will discuss here today. And in my opinion, this is the best bracket in college basketball. Very top heavy. You may chuckle a little bit of that, but me being me, and Iowa State's in that conference as well. But let's get into that here. And looking at the Big 12 bracket that begins on Tuesday, a very interesting game taking place in Kansas City, Missouri, also known as Hilton South to some teams during the past couple of years. And we got Arizona as the 1 seed, followed by Houston. Kansas as a 3, Texas Tech as a 4, Iowa State as a 5 seed. Same conference record as Texas Tech and Kansas, but they lost a couple tiebreakers, so they'll be playing on Wednesday, and they did not get a double bye. What are your early thoughts on this tournament, Andrew?
Well, thanks for asking, Rational Homer. It's definitely showing up in this segment here. I think the Big 12 will be awesome to watch. I think there's storylines in each round. I think there's a lot of opportunity for upset potential. Um, Starting from the top, I think Arizona is really strong, kind of a lock for a Final Four pick.
Yeah, they're just big at every position. They're just a
Right.
big team.
Yeah, and they've got studs at every position, honestly,
They
in that
got
whole starting lineup.
Burris, Bradley, 7-foot center, however tall he is.
That freshman Koa Pete, who's been pretty solid. So, yeah, I think they're really good. Houston, I don't think they're quite as good as they've been the last couple years, but still obviously really solid. And that Kingston Flemings is a stud.
Yeah, he can make jump shots, daily jumper. I mean, he's really good.
Right.
They got good guards. I don't feel like they're as good around the basket as they have been the past years. Like you said, they don't have that Roberts type player.
Right.
And I feel like their defense is kind of fallen off a little bit. Not much, but enough to where other teams can upset them a little bit easier.
Yeah, they feel definitely more beatable than the last 2 years. And I think because of the defense isn't quite as good. I think Kansas, while I'm not a Kansas fan at all, also just something to note, look for Bill Self potentially retiring at the end of this year. Just remember who said that. But I think they're kind of a fascinating storyline this March because they have potential #1 pick Darren Peterson. And like if he shows up, I think they can beat anyone. If he does his whole act of like not playing or whatever, then they could lose to anyone, not only in this tournament, but in the NCAA tournament. So that's definitely going to make me tune in to their games.
And an interesting thing about Kansas is in games that Peterson takes over 17 shots, they have a terrible record. I mean, it is abysmal, like 3-14 or something. It is really bad. So that's a very interesting thing, and that kind of sparks the debate that's been going on these past few months: is Kansas somehow better without Peterson?
I feel like I get what you're saying, especially when he becomes inefficient. But March seems to be built on like, do you have a guy who can get you a basket when it matters, when
Yeah,
everything else breaks?
do you have that guy?
Right, and he's the guy who, sure, he maybe took too many shots, but if you're in the last 2 minutes of the game and you just one-on-one go score, there's not many teams that have that guy, and there's not many teams that have potential number one pick guy in a loaded class. So, I mean, look, I could see them losing first round of the Big 12 tournament and NCAA tournament. I could also see them going very deep. So it just
Yeah, I
that's what
mean
makes
it's Bill
March
Self. Yeah, you have to respect Bill Self, regardless of
right.
how his team is playing. He knows how to coach, and it becomes all about matchups, and he's one of the best matchup exploiters I think in the game of college basketball.
For sure. And then I feel like Texas Tech and Iowa State kind of round out the top tier because then I feel like there's a decent drop off. Both of those teams, I could see them winning this tournament. I could see them going deep in the NCAA tournament. Texas Tech, obviously, JT Toppin's a stud. Iowa State, it's more like when they're clicking, they are really hard to beat. And then,
Yeah,
like we've seen,
when their defense is creating offense, they are a force to be reckoned with. Like they
right.
did
And then,
when they went on that 24-0 run against Arizona State on Saturday. It was
right.
defense leading to offense. And, you know, if their defense is on, it's a top five defense. So we never know. But yeah, I mean, you look at Texas Tech, and without JG Toppin, they still got that Christian Anderson, who's really good. They got that Petty. I mean, they got a couple guys that can. They got Atwell. He can make the
Oh, yeah,
three. I mean, you would think Texas Tech was kind of dead in the water a bit without JT Toppin, but they're making it work and they're still playing well and scary team.
for sure. They're just well coached. So yeah, we'll see. I think it's a really top heavy conference, like you said, and a lot of teams that can make a run in March.
Who do you have as dark horses potentially maybe winning a game or two in this Big 12 tournament?
I mean, you look at those teams playing Tuesday, a couple things. Cincinnati is one of the first four out. I don't think they're good at all. I don't, well, I mean, they're okay. Wes Miller is coaching for his job for sure. I
Yeah,
could
I mean,
see,
they beat Kansas at Kansas. Can't,
I mean, again, that's Kansas though. Like, did they show up or not? But
yeah.
I do think,
They beat Iowa State too, you know?
yeah, and I think that's why they're on the bubble versus
Yeah.
not even close to it. So, yeah, they win a game, play UCF, who is one of the last four buys. So, like, that'd be kind of a good bubble matchup. But I don't think either of those teams are going to make a run here. I think, obviously, BYU has a 10 that has been floundering, but has, again, potential number one pick. AJ DeBonsa leads the conference in scoring. He's a freak. I really don't think they're going to do much, but that's a Tuesday team that you never know could get hot. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
don't think anyone else, other than I could see maybe TCU as a 6 seed get a matchup with Kansas, and if they knock them off, Jamie Dixon's a good coach. That would be kind of like my dark horse of making it to the semis, maybe the finals. But I really just think the finals are going to be one of those top five teams.
Yeah, and I have TCU played as my dark horse too. Jamie Dix is a great coach, and you know they're a team that doesn't really have a lot of star players, but you know they play as a team and they get it done. And you know I think the sad thing about UCF potentially playing Cincinnati is one of those teams probably gets in the tournament if they win that game. One of them doesn't.
Right.
And if I had to pick, I'd rather have UCF in the tournament than Cincinnati, just because I feel like UCF is a better team overall. You got John Bull, and when he's on the floor, UCF is a much better team. They got Riley Tootle. He can make the three ball. Just a solid team. So I'd rather see UCF end up playing Arizona than Cincinnati or Utah. Who do you
Yeah,
have?
I
Yeah,
I
you go
agree.
ahead. But I mean, you look at Iowa State, just these matchups, you play basically 4 games in 4 days. I mean, if you're Iowa State, you get by Texas Tech, then you have to play Arizona. If you're TCU, you get by potentially Kansas, then you have to play Houston. And then you have to play the winner of the other side of the bracket. And I mean, that's grueling. It's 120 to 150 minutes of hard fought basketball in 4 days. And like, what's the effect will that have when they go into March Madness? Like, is it a situation where if you're already in the tournament, would you rather lose, maybe win one game than lose the next, not perfectly lose, but, not be upset about losing the next round, just so your guys can get some rest and prepare for the tournament that actually matters?
Yeah, I mean, couple things to that. I think winning 4 games in 4 days in this tournament for like an Iowa State or a TCU, more so Iowa State, that's going to be really difficult. I think it's possible, but that's going to take quite a bit of energy. I do kind of hate that argument when you're like, oh, should we lose because we'll be more rested, or then you don't go into the tournament on a winning streak. As a fan, I think winning games this week or in March Madness is just so much fun, especially even winning this tournament. Only one team's going to win the NCAA tournament. So I'm always of the kind of side where it's like go all out, win the tournament, have the awesome celebration on Saturday or Sunday before the selection show. And it's just, I don't like the argument that you should lose just to be well rested. So
Yeah.
I hope all these teams are thinking that.
Yeah, yeah, they're all in. You know, Kansas City's kind of known as Hilton South. Maybe some magic happens and they somehow pull up the upset against Arizona, and I think they probably would end up, I think, still playing Houston in the championship game if they can pull the upset over Arizona.
Yeah, I think Houston will make it from the bottom. I think Arizona, or I'll give the rational homer what he wants to hear. Arizona or Iowa State come out of the top, and then I think Arizona or Iowa State, if that's who's in the championship, no matter who's there from the bottom, that's who's gonna.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that assessment. I just think if Arizona's in the championship, I don't think there's anybody that beats them. They're just, as we said earlier, they're just so big and massive. And you look at like Houston or Kansas or TCU, um, those teams have been pretty inconsistent in the terms of things, and you just don't really know what to expect from those teams. And I mean, Arizona's, you know, number one seed for a reason. They're better than everybody else. So
Yeah, I think like I said, they're going to be one of my locks for the Final Four.
I
So
think I think
we'll see.
Arizona is for me is too. I mean, I think I don't know if Houston's a lock for my Final Four yet. Kind of have to see how they do in this tournament, but Kelvin Sampson's a great coach, and we will just see how this plays out this week in Hilton South.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good week. It's going to be awesome to watch all these tournaments. Hopefully, the Rational Homer in Hilton South gives him a little bit of joy. I'll leave it at that. But very excited for all these great games. Work productivity is going to be at a low, and it should be. And I really appreciate getting the invite to help out with the conference tournament previews.
Yeah, and the one thing to note is it does kind of stink for you. Well, I guess for us, because Iowa and Iowa State play around the same time, and Kentucky plays around the same time on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. And that's kind
Yeah,
of
it's gonna be difficult, but nothing I haven't conquered before. So I'll find a way to get all these games on the screen and keep everyone at work happy.
yeah, and hopefully, no iPads are thrown or anything of that nature. But
Yeah,
we will
I'm
see.
I'm known to I'm very level headed, so you don't have to worry about that.
Good to know. Good to know. This will conclude our show on the conference tournament wrap up, and we look forward to doing another podcast in the future, probably after Selection Sunday happens, and we'll talk about that tournament then. And remember, if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for sports-related content you'd like me to react to, send an email to rationalhomer@gmail.com.